You think you understand modern finance? You admire the brilliant corporate structures, the untraceable offshore accounts, the sheer genius of moving money across the globe in the blink of an eye. But what if I told you the blueprint for all of it wasn't written at Harvard Business School? It was perfected in the back rooms of illegal distilleries and the blood-soaked streets of Chicago. The real godfathers of finance weren't named Morgan or Rockefeller. They were named Lansky, Luciano, and Capone.
It all started with a simple problem. A very good problem to have, but a dangerous one. Prohibition in the 1920s turned organized crime from a neighborhood racket into a national enterprise. The money wasn't just flowing, it was a biblical flood. Al Capone, at his peak, was pulling in an estimated $100 million a year. That's over $1.5 billion in today's money. But you can't just walk into a bank and deposit $1 million in small, crumpled, whiskey-smelling bills without raising questions. You can't buy a mansion or a fleet of cars with cash that the government knows you shouldn't have. The cash was a liability. It was evidence. It needed to be cleaned. And this necessity, this desperate need to make dirty money look clean, gave birth to the first great financial innovation of the mob. If you're fascinated by how these hidden systems work, make sure you subscribe, because we're about to pull back the curtain on the entire global economy.
The term money laundering isn't a metaphor. It's literal. The mob bought businesses that were cash-intensive. Laundromats were a favorite, hence the name. So were vending machine companies, car washes, and restaurants. The process was simple, yet brilliant. Let's say a laundromat legitimately makes $500 in a day. The mob boss would slip in an extra $1,000 of his illegal liquor money into the cash register. At the end of the day, the books would show $1,500 in legitimate earnings. They paid taxes on it, of course. That was the cost of doing business, the price of legitimacy. Suddenly, that dirty $1,000 was now clean, taxable income from a legitimate business. It could be deposited in a bank, used to buy property, anything. They weren't just washing money, they were creating a paper trail where none existed, forging a history for cash that was born in crime. But this small-scale washing was just the beginning. It was tactical, not strategic. The man who saw the bigger picture was a Jewish mobster from Poland, a mathematical genius named Meyer Lansky. Lansky wasn't a street brawler, he was a visionary. He understood that the real power wasn't in controlling territory, but in controlling the flow of money. He looked at the mob's cash problem and saw a corporate finance challenge. He famously told his partners, "We're bigger than U.S. Steel," and he set out to build a financial structure to prove it. He realized that as long as the money stayed in America, it was vulnerable. The FBI, the IRS, they could always find it. The money had to disappear. It had to go somewhere beyond their reach. Lansky looked abroad and found his solution in a place famous for neutrality and secrecy, Switzerland. In the 1930s, Switzerland passed banking secrecy laws that made it a criminal offense for a bank to reveal a client's identity. For Lansky, this was the holy grail. He pioneered the process that is now standard for global tax evasion. First, a mob associate would fly to Switzerland with a suitcase of cash. They'd deposit it into a numbered, anonymous account. But the genius was the next step. The Swiss bank, holding the mob's dirty money, would then issue a loan for the exact same amount to a corporation back in the United States. This U.S. corporation was, of course, also secretly owned by the mob. So the mob was borrowing its own money. The dirty cash was now a legitimate tax-deductible loan from a respected foreign bank. This single maneuver is the foundation of modern offshore finance. To make this loan system work, Lansky needed a recipient in the U.S. that couldn't be traced back to him. He needed a ghost. This was the birth of the Shell Corporation as we know it today. He would set up a company, a legitimate legal entity that did absolutely nothing. It produced no goods, offered no services. Its only purpose was to exist on paper and to own things, or more accurately, to hide who owned things. He would create a corporation in Delaware, which would be owned by another corporation in Panama, which in turn was controlled by a trust in Liechtenstein. The ownership trail was a labyrinth, a maze designed to be unsolvable. By the time an investigator got through 3 or 4 layers, the trail would go cold in a country with no disclosure laws.
Every major tax evasion scandal you read about today, from the Panama Papers to the Pandora Papers, uses the exact same blueprint Meyer Lansky drew up 80 years ago.
Now, they had a system to clean money and a corporate structure to hide it. But they needed a place to deploy this capital, a massive cash-hungry business to act as the ultimate washing machine. They found it in the middle of the Nevada desert. Las Vegas was the mob's masterpiece. It was a city built from the ground up with laundered money. Mobster Bugsy Siegel, with backing from Lansky and Luciano, built the Flamingo. When he went over budget, they had him killed, a brutal form of corporate accountability. But they didn't abandon the project. They saw its potential. A casino is a river of cash. Thousands of people betting, winning, losing, millions of dollars changing hands every single day. How could anyone possibly track where it all came from? It was the perfect, legitimate front on a scale the world had never seen. And inside this perfect washing machine, they created their most audacious financial tool, the skim. It was beautifully simple. In the casino's count room, where all the cash from the tables was brought to be counted, the mob's hand-picked managers would simply take a percentage off the top, maybe 5, 10, 20%. This cash was never recorded. As far as the casino's books and the IRS were concerned, it never existed. It was pure, tax-free profit. This untaxed, unrecorded skim would be packed into briefcases and flown by couriers to the bosses back in Chicago, Kansas City, and New York. The Las Vegas casinos weren't just making the money, they were a direct pipeline of untraceable cash, funding the mob's entire empire. It was a corporate.
As Vegas grew, the mob needed even more capital. Their own cash wasn't enough, so they turned to their next great source of funds, the American worker. Through their control of unions, specifically the Teamsters, and their charismatic leader, Jimmy Hoffa, the mob gained access to one of the largest pools of private capital in the country, the union's pension fund. This was billions of dollars, the retirement savings of hundreds of thousands of truck drivers. For the mob, it was their own private bank. They would approve massive loans from the Teamsters Pension Fund to build the next generation of Vegas casinos, Caesar's Palace, the Sands, the Dunes. They were lending other people's money to themselves, often with little expectation of ever paying it back. They corrupted the sacred trust of a worker's retirement and turned it into their venture capital fund.
By the 1970s and 80s, the old ways were dying. RICO laws gave the government powerful new tools to prosecute organized crime. The mob needed to evolve again. They needed to become truly invisible. So they took the final step. They moved out of the back alleys and into the boardrooms. They took their laundered fortunes and invested them in legitimate businesses: food processing, construction, waste management, Wall Street brokerage firms. The money, now clean after passing through Vegas and offshore banks, was indistinguishable from any other investment capital. The grandsons of the bootleggers were now MBAs. They didn't need a gun to intimidate someone. They could do it with a hostile takeover or by manipulating stock prices.
On Wall Street, they found a new racket that was perfectly suited to their skills: the pump and dump. This scheme, made famous in movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, was perfected by mob-connected brokerage firms. Here's how it works. First, they'd buy up a massive amount of a worthless penny stock. Then their brokers would hit the phones, using high-pressure tactics and outright lies to create hype, pumping up the price of the stock. They'd create fake press releases, spread false rumors of a miracle product or a big merger. As unsuspecting investors rushed to buy in, the price would skyrocket. And at the peak of the frenzy, the mob insiders would dump all of their shares, making a massive profit and leaving everyone else holding worthless stock as the price crashed back to zero. It was highway robbery in a suit and tie.
So where is all that money now? It's everywhere. It's in the stock market. It's in real estate portfolios in London and New York. It's in private equity funds and venture capital firms. Decades of sophisticated laundering have washed it so clean that its criminal origins are forgotten. The financial DNA of Meyer Lansky is now embedded in the global economic system.
The shell corporations they pioneered are used by multinational corporations to avoid taxes. The offshore havens they exploited now hold trillions of dollars for the world's elite. The aggressive, rule-bending mindset they embodied is celebrated in some corners of Wall Street as just being a good businessman. The empire never fell, it just went public.
The greatest trick the mob ever pulled wasn't a heist or a racket. It was convincing the world that they were gone, when in reality, their methods had just become the industry standard. They created a playbook for operating in the shadows of the legal system, a playbook that has been adopted, refined, and scaled by countless others. They didn't just break the law, they warped the entire financial system around their needs. They held a dark mirror up to capitalism and showed just how exploitable it could be. The line between organized crime and legitimate high finance is sometimes so thin it's nothing more than a signature on a piece of paper. So the next time you look at the towering skyscrapers of a financial district, remember the blood, whiskey, and dirty cash that laid the foundation. The system we live in wasn't just designed by economists and politicians. It was also designed by criminals who were simply better at capitalism than anyone else. What do you think is the most surprising financial invention of the mob? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.